Right now, the National Interagency Fire Center has officially escalated national readiness to Level 5, their absolute highest emergency alarm. This is the first time this has happened since October of 2024. Across Oregon and Washington alone, 51 large wildfires are burning completely uncontained. The situation is so severe that the U.S. government has flown in 74 fire specialists from Australia and New Zealand, along with a massive Australian air tanker that has already dropped more than 500,000 liters of retardant on American fires. But here's the part almost nobody outside the Pacific Northwest realizes yet. This isn't just a West Coast story anymore. Satellite data confirms a smoke plume stretching 2,500 miles across the entire continent, degrading air quality from the Midwest all the way down to Florida. This is not a normal fire season update. Today we break down the fires that triggered this national emergency. We'll see why a Minnesota city recorded air pollution 3 times hazardous levels and why major interstate highways are shut down. We are measuring this against the worst wildfire season in Oregon's modern history. No guessing, no dramatizing, just the facts. If you live between Oregon and Florida, the air you're breathing this week has very likely already been touched by what's burning. Drop a comment right now. Has the sky where you live looked hazy or strange the last few days? Tell me your city. If you want to be the first to know every time something major develops, subscribe to the channel right now. It is completely free. A thumbs up also helps enormously. Let us go for 5,000 likes so the algorithm shows this to the people who need to see it. Now let us get into it. It started, as so many of this year's worst fires have, with lightning. In mid-July, a series of dry thunderstorms swept across the Pacific Northwest, producing thousands of lightning strikes across parched terrain. The Crosswhite Fire began on July 15th in Wheeler County, Oregon. Within days, it merged with the Box Springs Fire. Crosswhite has burned more than 191,000 acres, roughly the size of Chicago times 3, burned in high desert most will never visit. Not a single home in the Crosswhite zone has been lost so far thanks to the coordinated work of local fire departments. But Crosswhite isn't even the largest fire. That distinction belongs to the Big Grass Fire along the Oregon-Idaho border. This fire has consumed 280,000 acres, and containment is at just 5%. Level 3, Go Now orders are in effect. 4 homes have been lost along the border, with the fire actively burning through neighboring properties as it moves. The Jordan Valley Rangeland Fire Protection Association, a volunteer group of local ranchers, has been on the line around the clock. They've been working for 3 days straight, and now these volunteers are running low on the most basic resource, fuel. Here's the part of this story that connects directly back to your own life, even if you've never heard of Malheur County. Wildfires at this scale don't stay contained to rural land. A stretch of Interstate 84 in eastern Oregon was fully closed because of nearby fire activity before partially reopening under escort. Traffic pilot vehicles guiding drivers through smoke-choked corridors near the fire lines. The Bureau of Land Management separately closed public access to the North Fork campground, specifically to keep both the public and firefighters safe. Crews battled Big Grass and a neighboring fire called the Pier Fire on the Idaho side of the line. When a fire this size sits across a state border, it doesn't just threaten 2 rural counties. It threatens the roads and power lines. Local governments are responding at the most basic level. The Owyhee County Board of Commissioners scheduled an emergency meeting. Crosswhite and Big Grass aren't burning in isolation. To the west, the Brewer and Green Mountain fires have been threatening hundreds of homes. To the north, near Fossil, Oregon, the Roe Creek complex has burned roughly 192,000 acres on its own. Task forces conduct structure protection operations along Highway 26. Further east, a cluster of fires have been burning since early July. Entirely new fires, the Fox and Tartar fires on either side of the Snake River, sprang up and began growing quickly just this week. In the Burns area alone, 5 separate named fires made large wind-driven runs in a single afternoon. This year, they're competing for headlines against 2 fires more than twice their combined size. It's an entire region fighting on a dozen fronts simultaneously, with the same limited pool of firefighters and equipment. So here's the honest scale of what's actually happening across the region right now. Oregon alone currently has 85 active wildfires, burning across a roughly 1.1 million acres in 22 counties. Nationally, that number climbs to 95 large fires, with 13 new large incidents reported in just the last 24 hours. More than 1,700 firefighters are engaged, backed by 569 crews, over MEF-1,500 engines, and 158 helicopters. So far this year, more than 42,000 individual fires have burned upward of 4 million acres across the United States. Consider that a bad season like Government Flats, burning across 8 square miles, was enough to force evacuations and draw national news. This year, that same region is dealing with fires many times that size simultaneously. The sheer number of simultaneous incidents is what's actually straining the system to its breaking point. 4 million acres against 3 million in a typical year isn't a small overrun, It's the entire fire season running a third hotter. That's the difference between a bad summer and a summer that forces a country to ask two other countries for help. To understand just how much worse this could still get, it helps to look back 5 years to the worst wildfire season in Oregon's modern history. Over 72 hours around Labor Day 2020, a powerful east wind event turned multiple existing fires into megafires. 11 Oregonians had not survived, more than 4,000 homes had burned, and over 1.2 million acres burned in days. Whole towns in the Santiam Canyon were essentially erased. Here's the honest, important difference between that disaster and what's happening right now. Oregon lawmakers passed sweeping wildfire legislation in the years after 2020, funding resources and faster initial attack capacity. Improved coordination has been credited with preventing a repeat of 2020's scale of loss. This year's fires are larger, but the human toll remains dramatically lower, which is itself part of this story. This is why the country shifted to Preparedness Level 5, the highest tier that exists. The wildland fire community is currently mourning the loss of a firefighter from Nebraska who did not survive injuries in late June. It's a sober reminder that behind every acreage number there are real people walking directly into these conditions. When domestic resources are stretched that thin, the next step is asking other countries for help. 74 fire management specialists from Australia and New Zealand arrived to provide 30 days of operational support. New Zealand's contribution was small but specialized, including personnel trained in managing large-scale incidents. They were embedded within local incident management structures, providing support across planning and aviation coordination. A large air tanker from Australia, the Marie Bashir, had already been dropping fire retardant for weeks, delivering more than 500,000 liters of retardant before the personnel deployment even began. These same agreements have run in both directions for decades. The United States has sent hundreds of its own firefighters to Australia during their catastrophic bushfire seasons. This month, Australia and New Zealand are the ones answering the call, sending their people across an entire ocean. They came because American fire crews, however large, had reached the edge of what they could cover alone. Now let's talk about the smoke itself, because this is genuinely the part of the story with the widest reach, touching people who have never been anywhere near Oregon or Washington in their lives. Smoke from these fires is being pulled thousands of miles across the country by upper-level wind patterns, following what meteorologists describe as a roughly 2,500-mile path, stretching across the plains, the Midwest, and all the way to the East Coast. As of this morning, the plume has been confirmed reaching as far south as Florida, according to NOAA satellite tracking. It's worth noting this isn't purely a U.S. story either. Canada is dealing with its own severe fire season at the same time, with more than 850 wildfires burning across the country, the vast majority of them uncontained. Smoke from those Canadian fires has been layering on top of the plume drifting up from Oregon and Washington. That combination is precisely why some cities have seen conditions worsen and improve in waves over the past several weeks. Earlier in July, during an especially severe smoke episode, the city of Duluth, Minnesota, recorded an air quality index of 934. For context, anything above 300 is officially classified as hazardous, the worst category on the entire scale. Duluth hit more than 3 times that threshold, shattering the city's own previous all-time record set back in 2021. It's worth understanding exactly why wildfire smoke specifically gets treated as such a serious health threat. The particles driving that AQI number are called PM2.5, roughly 30 times thinner than a single human hair. Particles that small bypass your body's natural filtering systems and travel straight down into the deepest part of your lungs. From there, some particles cross directly into your bloodstream, triggering inflammation linked to heart and respiratory distress. Health officials have been urging residents to limit outdoor activity and run air purifiers indoors whenever the index climbs. Duluth has spent years branding itself as a climate haven, a city people move to specifically to escape the worst effects of warming. That reputation didn't protect it from recording the single worst air quality reading in its own recorded history. Research found that extreme heat fueling this season's fires was 5 times more likely because of a warming climate. The wildland fire agreements between the United States, Australia, and New Zealand date back to the early 2000s. Australia and New Zealand have sent firefighting personnel to the U.S. 6 separate times since the year 2000. It explains why 74 people from the other side of the planet could show up in Oregon within days of a request being made. It runs in both directions by design, ensuring that as global air quality faces new challenges, we face them together. When catastrophic bushfires tore through Australia at the end of 2019, the U.S. sent hundreds of its own wildland firefighters across the Pacific in return, some of them missing Christmas with their own families to do it. Every one of these deployments works the same way. The country receiving the help reimburses the country sending it, turning what could be a purely charitable gesture into a sustainable system both sides can actually rely on year after year. whichever direction the fire happens to be burning that season. I want to be direct about something here, because it would be easy to let a story like this spiral into something it isn't. This is not the same historic smoke event that choked the Midwest and Northeast back in mid-July, when pollution levels briefly exceeded 10 times the hazardous threshold across major cities. Officials are explicit that this newer round of smoke, while genuinely serious and reaching remarkably far, is not expected to reach that same historic severity. That distinction matters. Two real events, two different scales, and conflating them doesn't make either one more accurate. The same discipline applies to comparing this season to 2020. Acres burned can look similar on a map, but the human outcome so far has been genuinely different, and both facts deserve to be said clearly rather than picking whichever one makes for a more dramatic headline. Here's the honest, complete picture of what's actually happening in this country's forests and skies right now. A wildfire season already running a full 1,000,000 acres above its 10-year average pushed the entire national firefighting system to its highest possible alert level. Two enormous fires in the Oregon high desert, one of them still barely 5% contained, are burning through terrain most Americans have never heard of, threatening entire communities under mandatory evacuation and cutting off roads that connect one part of the country to another. And the smoke rising off that same ground doesn't stop at any state line, any highway, or any ocean of separation. It simply keeps traveling until it settles over a Florida driveway thousands of miles from where the first spark actually landed. Think about the actual chain here for a second, because it's easy to skim past how strange it really is. A lightning bolt hits dry grass in a county most Americans couldn't point to on a map. Within 2 weeks, that same event has pulled in incident commanders from Sydney and Auckland, shut down a stretch of American highway, and put a measurable haze over a Florida beach a continent away. Nothing about that chain required a single dramatic villain or a single decision made in Washington, D.C. It just required dry fuel, lightning wind, and enough scale for physics to do the rest. We'll be honest about where this goes from here, too, because that's the responsible way to end a story that's still actively developing. Containment on big grass sits at just 5%, meaning firefighters are still very much in the early stages of getting ahead of it. Crosswhite, at 21%, is further along but far from finished. Peak fire season in the Pacific Northwest typically runs through September, which means the resources currently stretched across Oregon, Washington, and the volunteer fire lines along the Idaho border still have weeks of this ahead of them, not days. If there is one sentence to take away from this video, let it be this. A lightning strike in a stretch of Oregon rangeland just triggered a national emergency, called in firefighters from 2 other countries, and put haze in the sky over Florida, all within the same 2 weeks. And the only reason this isn't already being called another Labor Day 2020 is because of lessons this state was forced to learn the hard way, 5 years ago almost to the day. We will keep tracking Crosswhite and big grass as containment numbers change day to day, and we'll keep watching where that smoke plume travels next. Subscribe so you do not miss the next update. Drop a comment and tell me what the air quality has actually looked like in your part of the country this week. Let us push for 5,000 likes on this video so the algorithm puts it in front of the people who genuinely need to see it. We will see you in the next one.